Sammy, thanks for coming onto the show. I've been on the Ashe Academy's Inspire, Uplift, and Engage podcast a few times, so I'm super excited to finally bring you onto LLAG Radio. As the co-founder and the executive director at the Ashe Academy, you've mentored many young students of color transitioning from school into the workplace for a career in STEM and in the arts. So my first question to you is, what are the most common reasons why students of color struggle with finding work in STEM and the arts? And are these the same problems that you experience yourself?
Ooh, great first question. I first want to say thank you so much for having me. It's been great collaborating with you over these last few months. So I'm happy to discuss all this stuff. But I would say exposure to STEM was a huge gap for myself. Like the reason why I started the Ashe Academy was because I didn't get the mentorship that I was looking for, or didn't know how to like articulate those relationships. And I stumbled into fintech in my late 20s, and I'm like, oh, that's what this is, and like coding and like just learning about what it was and how it wasn't that much harder than learning any other skill set I had. Being in that corporate space, I noticed that once again, in every other walk of my life, I was one of very few Black people in the room. Although there were a lot more, it was a lot more diverse there than I was expecting. It was like, okay, there's like a couple other Black people in here out of a 200 staffed location. Like, this is very weird. Like, what is keeping, like, specifically Black people, but like any other person of color? Like, what is the barrier? I really say that it's like exposure, just like knowing this is an opportunity and knowing, like, okay, like, you don't have to have a specific degree in computer science to go into something that's in the tech field. Not everything is med school to go into the sciences. Like, there are so many different layers to that big umbrella. So yeah, it's really, and that's what much of my work is, like exposing people to, like, this is what this person does. This is what this is what this specific type of engineer does here. Software engineer does this thing at this specific company, and like it's different all around. But like, if you're interested in it, you can go into it. Like, it's not that hard. Like, here's the steps. Like, let's at least get you started out and then pursue it.
Yeah, and it seems like that sense of options is what really uh, bogs down a lot of people trying to find work, because they tend to have this traditional mindset of the type of works they're able to pursue. Oh, I need to be a doctor, I need to be a nurse, or but they don't look at all these other different options. So speaking of representation, you and I both know that it's super important to see people of color everywhere, in art, in entertainment, in STEM, in the corporate office. What I want to know is, within art and STEM, where do you think we need the most representation? Like, what sections within the job market have you identified as areas of opportunity for people of color?
So, like where you don't see the people, but like they make all the decisions, like,
Mm-hmm.
the people like signing the documents and
Mm-hmm.
like at the end, like the end user is when you get to see that software, or like you get to see that movie. But like the people in the way, way, way back who are like moving things around, I want to see more of us there.
Yeah.
That's where we need to be. And I want to shift our focus from, I would love to see like POC casts, like we get that too. But when we're in the room for those decisions that are being made for the budgets that are dictating like how many POC shows we're getting, we need to be in those conversations. Otherwise, we're still going to struggle to even get any bit of the pie that we want to see. So yeah, those technical positions that are behind the scenes, like even just on camera. I mean, like controlling the camera,
Mm-hmm.
producing, writing, like all of these things, and even that's closer to something like that's the gateway, and like people know about those, like writing and producing, like directing. Those are like the favorite roles
Mm-hmm.
within the arts, but like there are so many other artistic avenues that, like with lighting, sound, like to even have the show, we need both of those things.
Mm-hmm.
Like learning those techniques and skill sets are super important. And by and large, as much as I love my reality shows, I will see a lot of crew members are still not people of color.
Mm-hmm.
And I pick up on these things. Like every once in a while, like something gets hectic and like, oh, you see camera two, camera one just turned around like somebody's in a fight. And it's like, oh wait, but like why is crew still not us? Like this is what we're recording all of us like interacting, and it doesn't always have to be a fight. Like I have good reality shows too in the mix, but most of them are not. But still, like all of these positions that make things happen, I really need us in those conversations. So again, my work is exposing people to like, okay, you see the end product, you see something that's cut together. Editing, we need you guys in the room for editing, putting the pieces together. So you usually, if you pursue these degrees like in film, you're learning how to do everything with all these different hats. So you do get exposed to those positions. But if you really want to become a director, you start venturing out into a path where you're no longer trying to be doing all those things. Mm-hmm. But I really want to inspire people who are like, I really like setting the mood of a whole entire feature film, and that's done through editing. Like I want people to know that they can go into those avenues. So yeah, like behind the scenes is really where I would love to see more of us, because me existing in the corporate space, and you know, I have been able to navigate some very interesting spaces, and I usually have interactions with like the highest up. Like I'm just a very, you know, like I guess I'm just a very warm character, and like it's been easy for me to get up there and like have exposure to people like really high up in the company. And it's like, why am I the only one? Mm-hmm. And it's not like I'm a chief it's like, but I don't want it to ever be where I'm the only one in the room, because I don't want to speak for all of my people and all of the communities that I encompass. But it's like that's a very hard burden to hold.
Oh yeah.
To be like, okay, well, like, how do you feel about this? And no one's ever asked me recently, but like, how do you feel as the Black? Like, what is that like? I cannot speak to that because there are so many dimensions of my own identity that are not by and large part of my community. Like I am from the suburbs. I grew up going to PWIs. Undergrad is the only time I didn't, and then grad school I was back at one. So it's like I am the X factor. Like so please don't use me as like the compass for everyone. So yeah.
So how would you say, like, you know, when students come up to you and they're like, hey, you know, I want to be able to you know, get a job in this particular industry, but it's, you know, there isn't a lot of diversity and I don't know anybody there, and like, so how do you go about getting someone's foot in the door in an industry that is traditionally already so blocked out?
So my networking has had to be like using me as that X factor. Like, okay, having to let people know, like, I want to see more people who look like me in these spaces. Mm-hmm. So what are you going to do to help me do that? Before I'm even talking to the student, like, okay, we have an opportunity to talk to a few different employers, and we're bringing in students eventually. Like, okay, how much of that can we make sure that we have a diverse, and then diversity is very like, it's a very interesting term because there's so many different layers of what diversity, like informational diversity is something. Mm-hmm. And that could be completely one demographic that's in there that just has different information. You're like, well, it's diverse enough. No, that's not where we're stopping. So yeah, it's like, okay, setting that intention with the decision makers and people that are moving and shaking. And then when people ask me like, okay, how do I get into, I need to know exactly what lane they're trying to get to if they say an industry, because there are so many avenues that you could explore there. Or you may find out that the one you chose is not a great fit, but I don't want you to give up on said industry just because like that one company wasn't it. Like you could find yourself in situations where that specific job and that team wasn't it, but if you change teams within this global corporation, it might work out for you. So,
Mm.
um, but I will say, learning how to navigate the messed up society and system has been something I have a PhD in now. Uh, so like I'll naturally just be like, okay, prepare for the disappointment. Like we're not there yet for that. It's been removed from society.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to know that someone's going to say some type of microaggression. Like
Mm-hmm.
be prepared for it so that it doesn't ruin your day. Or make sure that you have someone that you can talk to before you take it to HR where it becomes a situation. Like get some allies in there as soon as you can. Find some people you could trust. But I also don't. And my former coworkers will know. Like I had very clear boundaries with them. Like
Mm-hmm.
you impact my well-being and my livelihood. If I get too close to you and you decide to go switch up and tell some information to hires up and I am no longer with the company, this is why we're not friends until I leave this company. So don't take it personal. But there are just certain avenues of my life you don't get access to. Like I have a business IG that everybody can follow,
Mm-hmm.
but that's not the Facebook. The Facebook is where I can be completely me. I'm gonna be a mess still on the public one because there's a few layers. Like you've noticed that I'm a diplomat. I haven't said any specific demographics, but people can kind of figure it out. Uh, but still, like finding those allies in these spaces, like wherever you can, whatever that looks like. Maybe it's not like the exact like ethnicity of yourself, but
Mm-hmm.
there's some commonplace between people of color. Like we know some mess is going to happen, and if you can find some people that you could at least look at and you're like, yeah, okay, go into this, like get a group chat, like get prepared for the group chat because that's where you survive these situations. But there's always going to be something, and even in all POC spaces, there's going to be something. We're not a monolith. We're not always going to agree, and I don't
Mm-hmm.
want us to always agree. Like that's also not the flip side of like, okay, like we're going to be in these spaces with something or something's going to go wrong or there's going to be disappointments. There's also going to be on the other side. So like as long as you're prepared for that and you like expect it and it's not as bad when it does happen, then you're going to be okay. So but getting your foot in the door is usually through an internship after all that mess that I just said. An internship, and I'm a big advocate for internships, although you know and I feel like you may have just posted about this recently.
Yeah, unpaid
Uh,
internships.
um, all for a paid internship. The unpaid ones, I went through a bunch of struggles throughout my early career because of unpaid internships. Like,
Really?
my goodness. Finances. Like, that is number one cause for me to be depressed. I'm a Taurus
Mm-hmm.
also. Like money is a huge factor emotionally for us. So yeah, when I was broke, I was also very depressed. And it's just like this cannot be real life. So yeah, I'm a big proponent of internships, but being as strategic as possible while there are huge barriers for us where and us as people of color, like not being able to just do unpaid work full time
Mm-hmm.
for an indefinite number of months. Like,
Yeah,
I,
it's not
I
feasible.
like that. I don't. I understand. Like that's not okay. But by and large, the way that you get into these industries is that you're going to be doing some sort of internship. So chances are, I would hope that during your like schooling,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's higher education or you're doing an internship in high school, if you're lucky enough to have a high school that has a program like that, like I did. So, X Factor, let's like, I always call out my privileges of like, even early on, like I had access to a lot of great schools and like things were just like I had editing software as early as sophomore year of high school, only because I didn't join that class in freshman year. Like all of these things that were just at my hands. Um, so yeah, take the opportunities that are available to you. If you are able to do an internship for credit for school,
Mm-hmm.
do that get into the door, make those great relationships, those networks. Like I still, 11 years later, still keep in contact with someone I interned with, and they are very well connected within like the entertainment industry. So
Wow.
it's like build these great relationships with people. You never know what could happen there. Like these could be stepping stones. Like, oh, you did this one thing for 3 months. Like that's really helpful.
Hmm.
But it is very difficult to go tell someone to do something unpaid for like an unknown amount of time. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I did you post about this recently? Because I feel like you had a story where you left one.
Yeah, I had
Okay.
an unpaid internship. I was at a startup tech company over in Sunnyvale, and I was there for just about a month. But yeah, it was difficult because they didn't. Um, we were in one of those buildings with a bunch of different startups, and they had like a
Mm-hmm.
cafeteria and all. And I remember I was super excited. I was like, "Oh my god, this is like my first like office cafeteria experience." But I was like, "Oh, what? The food's not free? I have to pay for this shit?" And I was like, "Hold on a second. I'm biking here. I have to pay for the food here." I was like, this internship is costing me more money than like I'm getting out of it. So I ended up leaving that one. But yeah, I mean it's difficult. But I actually wanted to go and talk about sort of the other side of representation. Because the other side of representation has to do with the way that people can actually dismiss your problems because they think that you're very well represented. And um, I've seen white folks or Asian communities who will dismiss anti-blackness because they assume that, well, there's black representation in media and entertainment, and therefore racism doesn't exist. And I think a perfect example of this was, the election of President Obama and the subsequent feeling that, oh my God, racism is defeated. So, in your opinion, what are the limitations and the downsides of associating a community's sense of self worth with representation?
I'm sorry to laugh. I there was a brief moment where racism had like randomly gone away, and I was
Right?
like, "What a fleeting millisecond that went away for." um, sorry, can you re-ask the question?
Yeah. So, I mean,
It just like took me down for a while when
oh, yeah.
racism,
I mean,
like
you have to.
thinking of racism being gone for that
And
millisecond. Just
people were really convinced. Like people were really like they were like MLK's dream has come alive. I'm like, hold
oh
on a
my
second.
gosh,
Wait a
like
minute. Wait a minute. Wait a
you want to see me malfunction? Tell me that
minute.
something has been solved. Or like, well, let me QA that. Let me just check that out real quick.
All right. So, like on that idea of representation, my question was, what do you think are the limitations or the downsides of associating and really clinging on to this idea of representation as a marker of a community success or whether or not they're still struggling or not?
Mm. Well, I feel like representation and like diversity and inclusion is treated like a quota,
Hmm. Yeah.
so that as soon as we get that number, we're good. And like that's not the root of the problem. The root of the problem with representation is not only from the inspiration standpoint of like I want people to see me in these spaces even though we don't look exactly alike.
Hmm.
um, but like okay, there's another black man in there. I could see myself going into marketing and no matter what industry, like okay, someone's there, like I can do it too.
Hmm.
Perfect. But I also want people to know that I'm in spaces where I'm being respected and they should feel the same way.
Hmm.
And it shouldn't be like, okay, we threw them in there. We can still disrespect them even though we didn't want them here. And like, I don't want people to feel like I got into these spaces and I don't feel comfortable and I don't feel safe. Now, may that happen very quickly? I'm chances are no,
Hmm.
but that's the real work of like, okay, I want to set people up so that they are okay once they get there. And that's more of the work on the decision makers that are bringing people in.
Hmm. Hmm.
So as soon as we see like more people of color in these spaces, I'm hoping that the culture is shifting because we are excelling. Once we get into these spaces, we excel. Like everything, like culture
Hmm.
wise, just in the industries that we take up space in. Like oh, suddenly everyone's getting along because we're we're able to excel in our expertise and like we're respected as such. But if that doesn't happen, but we are just meeting quotas, like that's never going to be it. And then also when people like say overrepresented, I don't want it to be like a percentage of the like population is what we see as like you're serving as a representation, because the like numbers for black people are very low within this whole country.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you break it up between like immigrant black people, like the whole diaspora, like that's like we're really like
Splitting hairs. Yeah.
chopping it up.
Mm-hmm.
So I never want it to be like like the representation should be like people seeing themselves and seeing their culture represented on a personal level, and not like a certain number of Asian people should be in this industry, because that's how many Asian people exist in the United States. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's where I feel like if you're hitting higher than those numbers on like the population standpoint, then people are like, well, they're doing great because they've reached this 20%, and like we're good
Mm-hmm.
because we must be. And it's like, have you surveyed your staff? Like, do they feel represented? Do they feel represented in higher management? Because that's another dimension of this, like getting us into these spaces. And then I also noticed that there was very few people of color in the management positions, like
Mm-hmm.
supervisory. Like, it's fine if we're there to do like the more, I don't want to say laborious tasks, but like everything entry level and maybe like just before management. But as soon as we get to managerial positions or higher, way like the C suite, like why are there no people of color there?
Yeah.
Like that's where I start like doing some major digging. Um, so yeah, it's a lot of difficult pioneering on my behalf if I want to. Like I also can't be a proponent of like, okay, get us in there if I'm not in these spaces
Mm-hmm.
in the management. So it's like, what is my barrier? Like I check off all the boxes.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you really want to break out like the boxes that you need to check as a person of color in these corporate spaces, like many of them I'm already good to go with. Like
Mm-hmm.
why am I not experiencing this extravagant life that I should be?
Yeah.
That's my major complaint to the universe. Like, okay, if this is how it's supposed to be, what box am I missing? Like, what's going on? So that's really why, like, as much as I'm trying to push my way through this corporate landscape and like capitalism, like literally opting in and like finding my way, I'm also making sure that my social good work is bringing as many people behind me and pushing that door open and breaking the door down and knocking the whole wall down. I'm like, okay, make some more room for us here, because I am no better. I was not the best student in any space I was ever at, whether it was a whole bunch of people of color in the room or otherwise. But like, I know that I'm excellent. So there's got to be many more people with similar or completely different backgrounds who are people of color who or people who belong to communities similar to my own, who can do these jobs that I don't see myself or anyone within that the community represented in. It's like, come on.
Yeah. Yeah. And you were talking about this idea of uh, sort of the facade that we can sort of focus on by looking at these quotas and just this general idea of, once you hit this threshold, then you've sort of, accomplished
Yeah.
your metrics for diversity and inclusion. We're sort of going into this conversation of this myth of diversity and inclusion, this idea that, oh, okay, well, an organization can hire 20 Asian people, therefore they are inclusive of Asian people. But you were sort of talking about how it goes deeper than that. We're also talking about how are we treating these employees? What is their mobility like within this organization? And what are the different opportunities that they're afforded? Because it's one thing to just have a face that looks like you in a company, but what are they doing? Is it actually quality work? Are they being compensated fairly as much as everybody else is getting paid?
That part. The compensation. Woo.
Yeah.
Loaded.
Mm-hmm. And so another topic that we are sort of going into, that's related to diversity and academics, is elitism within education. A lot of students of color feel pressured to go to an Ivy League or to go to a top college like Stanford because they believe that the only way to excel in life, the only way to be seen as valid, is to attend a prestigious university. But I think it's important to also ask the question of how do we break free from this mentality that the only colleges that matter are the ones that are high rank. So how, like when you have students who come up to you and they still are in this mindset of, you know, thinking that the only colleges that matter are the ones that are elite, or that's the only way that they'll be able to, do well in life. Like, how do you sort of contextualize that?
Well, I can't tell them that they're wrong because, in the grand scheme of things, where you go, your built in networks for that do matter,
Yeah.
especially as a person of color. And so, a lot of my work is like navigating, like, okay, the existing system sucks,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but until it gets dismantled and rebuilt, we have to navigate it. So I can't say if you have the ability and have all these scholarships to go to Harvard
Mm-hmm.
that you shouldn't go.
Yeah. Yeah.
My conversation is going to deviate into, okay, you're going to a PWI, going to Ivy League PWI. There's going to be some cultural things there that may be completely disrespectful to every part of you.
Okay. How do
So
they usually
prepare
respond?
for that disappointment. Luckily I haven't had to talk to somebody about it like that, but like I'm taking it to like a super deep level with that,
Mm-hmm.
where it's like, okay, like prepare for. And I also don't want to be like, okay, it's going to be terrible. Like that,
Mm-hmm.
it may never be that way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they might have just skated free out of there. I'd be super surprised if it did happen that way. Um, but no, I would put value into personalizing your educational career
Hmm.
and knowing that once you get out of school, unless you're going somewhere where it means something to them that you did go to Harvard or you went to Yale, and that, oh, okay, like you got the job just off of that, off the strength of that alone,
Mm-hmm.
regardless of GPA. Like they were just like, okay, that's where I went to. Good, you're in. Or you had a network that set you up that way. Like people do have these experiences, and
Mm-hmm.
people of color do have these experiences, like based on like sororities and fraternities they're a part of. Like they have built-in networks. But I also want people to move away from the fact that, like, one of my first jobs out of college, I was like, yeah, and I have a degree, and they're like, blink, blink, okay. And this was an internship, and I was like, oh, that means nothing to anyone. Like I literally got this degree for me. And like
Wow.
moving forward from then on was, okay, I got an MBA, but that's for me. Like I got it because the one thing I was missing within my film degree was like marketing. Like I know how to create things,
Mm-hmm.
but how is anyone else going to care? Like it's going to take marketing. Like, okay, let's build a relationship with the customer.
Mm-hmm.
So that degree was like, did I have to go get a master's for that? No, I know that now, but there was a little bit of like, okay, I'm no longer just a creative. I'm practical too.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, it has to be super personal. Like any like people that get multiple degrees, it was like, okay, as long as you know that the debt you're accumulating, or if you get scholarships, great. I'm super happy for you that you don't have to pay all that money to Sally Mae. Sally Mae is still knocking on my door. Uh, but I just want people to know, like, okay, you're accumulating this knowledge for yourself. This degree is for you. Aside from the career paths that require the degree, like doctors, you need that.
Yeah.
That magic. We want you to go to school as long as you go to school. Like we're not talking about that. But no, like it has to be a personalized view of it because the Ashe Academy started out from a very elitist standpoint.
Hmm.
I was because I was like, okay, I want the best of the best of the best, and like we're gonna have this academy of like the top students. I was like, that like they already have all the help they need. Like if you're already the best of the best, chances are you're going to be set up for more success. Like you're going to be tapped to go to the Ivy Leagues, or it's going to be full ride. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's not the people that I need to be impacting. It's the people with less in common with my upbringing and more in common with where they want to go, and me knowing like, okay, this is how you get there, and I'm going to move mountains to make sure you do.
Wow.
So yeah, I really am very passionate about, especially knowing like how great I, and this is not like an ego boost, but like how great I am and how discounted someone could be who checks all the boxes but still doesn't get the job, or like had a
Mm-hmm.
great interview but still didn't get the job. And it's like, okay, like what is stopping me from pursuing what I'm going after? Like there's no missing skill sets. There's like I read all of the requirements. Like I'm good to go.
Mm-hmm.
And chances were some of those times I was overqualified, and they didn't want to deal with somebody who was gonna kick down the door and try to take
Wow.
their job. That is ego. I'll claim that one. That was a little, but no, these are things like, okay, if you know how to do every bit of the job on there, you're overqualified. So let's examine that part. Like if you're overqualified, maybe that's not what you should be applying for. Maybe you're beyond that point. Um, so yeah, I've had to talk down a lot of the elitism that's just embedded in me of like even me graduating from high school or like junior year, like don't go to the neighborhood community college. Like do not
Mm-hmm.
go there.
Mm-hmm.
Go to the 4 year school, because like this and that were the reasons why not to go. Whereas I could have been saving money, and I was still going to go on to whatever 4 year after that. Like all of these things that are just like built in into me that I have to like stop. That's not pertinent to anyone but the doubt.
So,
Like
so like when you're you know, you're you're talking to somebody who has all these different qualifications. You know, they've taken the classes, they have the knowledge, they have the skill set, but they just keep running into these walls. And oftentimes as a job seeker, it can be kind of confusing because you're just like, I'm putting out resumes, like my resume looks great, like my stuff looks great. I just keep getting no's, like I just can't find it. And I'm sure like nowadays it's probably even more difficult with COVID and with everything that's been going on. Like, are there like what are the situations that are really trying and really difficult for you when it comes to like bridging these connections and these gaps for these students? Are there areas within your job that you feel like it's a real big challenge, but you are it's worth it. It's worth the effort.
well, lucky enough, as unlucky as it was to graduate in 2010 from undergrad, that was right like 2 years into the financial crisis.
Oh yeah,
So
yeah.
it's like this thing keeps happening. Uh, so that's also why I'm like, prepare for bad things to happen. They happen all the time around me. Uh, so that's also why I'm like, okay, also don't freak out. Like, also don't worry about things not working out. Chances are they may not. Chances are things might be going well for 5 years. Then we have something else that happens.
Yeah.
So I feel blessed enough that I'm prepared and that I can prepare other people for it. At least like as much as like literally not having a job and income not coming in. Like I was
Hmm.
very blessed to work for a tech company during the pandemic. Could be working remote. I never lost any hours or any income during that whole time. Like
Wow.
very blessed to be in that position. I acknowledge that. Um, then had a career move top of 2021, which was back in the office. So that was a very interesting situation. Um, but I always tell people that there's always going to be a situation where you're discounted and you just have to move on. Like the pivot was last year was the year of the pivot. Like, okay,
Oh my gosh, yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm not gonna go into my pivot, but like, I mean, I'm just like, yes, totally the pivot, totally. But how was like, what was that pivot for you?
so we literally had a board meeting the day that they closed everything down, like we're meeting and it's like the news is coming in like, oh, like we're about to be shut down. It's like, shut down? Like
What?
really? Like shut down? Like March 2020 was the moment of deceit and denial. Like
Oh
we're just not,
no.
this is not real. And then it was like the Tuesday after that was you're going home, and it might be a couple weeks. We'll see. And then
Oh
it
my
turned into
gosh.
2 months, and then it kept on going. So everyone, like the Ashe Academy is 100% volunteer. So everyone has day jobs in
Hmm.
addition to the mentorship and all of the work for our events. So
Hmm.
um, I get sent home from that, and then I'm like, okay, well, like fundraising, how? Wait, like how are you going to ask people for money when like some people are on furlough, some people are not working at all.
Hmm.
Um, a blessing in disguise. Sad that someone had to like pass to invigorate people to donate, but George Floyd during June, we had a huge influx of people like donating, and that was kind of what kept us rolling
Wow.
from then forth. But like, how do you really ask people for things? So it turned into a lot of like, we're just going to do the work. So
Wow.
it'll be on Zoom, it'll be virtual. We'll do all of our events that we had planned. Um, but literally, it was like, okay, while you guys are at home and while we're at home, I'm sitting on resources. Like,
Hmm.
in addition to just me being, just a person that knows things, I have a great board and like a great network of people that I had really not tapped to their true capabilities. So, like, how we even started talking was this podcast that I threw together.
Hmm.
It's like, while we're here, why don't we do this idea that I've been sitting on for 3 years that I just was not confident enough, like, didn't want to see my face on, but now everybody sees my face every week talking to talking to some people. But literally, that was it. That was like, okay, we have these networks. We might know people. We might follow them. Like, ask them to come on the show, and that was the major pivot that turned into like a major thing for us, where it's like, okay, that's how we're getting the word out about us, is that we're just
Wow.
talking to people. Just like, okay, what your career? What better way than talk to somebody for 30 to 40 minutes about like, okay, like why did you go into your career? Like what were the steps to go there? Like that's been great.
Wow. Wow. That's one hell of a pivot. And it's um it's cool because I remember being on the show and, you know, as someone who, has my own podcast, like I can definitely say that the process that happens internally as you meet people and as you interview them, like something happens, like something clicks. And I think it's a combination of hearing other people's experiences and being able to have this opportunity to share your own experience, that you have a lot of transparency of like, oh, this is like I like this, or I like this is what's important to me, because you just start to hear yourself and you start to hear like, oh, okay, like, this is what I'm into. And for me, that's sort of what allowed me to understand that I had to pivot to starting my own agency from working in advertising. Um, but sort of talking about this shift and this idea of bad things happening. I wanted to go ahead and talk about mental health a little bit, because as a founder of a nonprofit company who mentors students, you're seen as a community leader and as a working professional who's doing what they want. But as you've mentioned, you experience imposter syndrome. What has that been like for you, and how do you deal with it?
So I would say, and I would argue, well, shout out to you on the agency just as a marketer. Like, shout
Oh,
out
thank
to you.
you.
Like, come on. Like, we love to see it.
Thank you.
I would say I have not had the opportunity to experience imposter syndrome
Hmm.
because I've been blocked out of every opportunity to feel like I don't belong here. I've had to wait so long to get into the spaces where it's like, okay, like I'm here. I deserve the space, the one piece of pie that I got, that little French silk, that vegan French silk slice that I got. I deserve that. It's so small at this point. It's been outside. It's room temperature. It should be ice cold. Like it took so long for me to get that it's like, okay, like this is mine. So I do feel for people that get into spaces and they're like, oh, like, do I really belong here? And I'm like as cocky as ever and sounding as like super egotistical. Trust me, like if you guys, you guys out there, if you knew me, I'm actually a very down to earth, very warm person, very nurturing. Like I get this way so that people know, like, don't doubt yourself. Talk
Yeah.
back to your doubt. If you, it's doubt usually says the bad thing and doesn't really have anything to follow it up with. There's no details to the doubt. It's really just, oh, you can't do that. Like, you don't
Mm-hmm.
deserve this. You don't belong here.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't I belong here? Please tell me why I've been spending multiple years in this industry and I don't belong to be here.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I go with that. So yeah, I have never been in a position to really sink my teeth into imposter syndrome. Um, I yeah, I couldn't say that I have felt that I was out of place anywhere that I
That's good. I
finally
mean,
got into.
I think it's like, I know that for me, experiencing imposter syndrome, I know that one of the ways that I definitely make myself feel better is to, I have a journal, and sometimes what I'll do is I'll flip through my journal and like I'll look through my past entries and I'll be like, I did that shit, I did that shit, I did that shit, because
Mm-hmm.
you forget what it is that you've done, because sometimes you're just so like goal oriented that you end up in a place and you're just like, how did I get here? Do I belong here? But I think what you said is a really good reminder that you do have to take the initiative to talk shit to yourself when you are like being negative against yourself. Like you have to be able to dispel your own negativity, because nobody else does. And that's one of the hardest things about imposter syndrome, is that it's this internal battle. But I think
Mm-hmm.
for you, in the situation that you're in, where you're feeling like, you know what, like I've been waiting for this spot, like I deserve to be here. I totally
Mm-hmm.
get that, because I remember getting my last job at an agency, and I was like significantly older than some of the other youngins, and I was just like, hold on a second, like I understand that they might feel that way, but I'm like, no, 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 I can't. Like I've been waiting for the shit. I'm older, and I'm like, I should, but I definitely get that. So my last question is sort of is related to activism, and essentially the simple ways that we can all pitch in to help. As a writer, I'm a strong believer in the fact that social media can be a space where you can actively support other communities, and being online doesn't necessarily mean that you can't do the work. For you, what are
Mm.
your favorite ways to be involved with your activism, both online and in person?
Making sure that I have a balance of both is super important for me. Just because I live in the suburbs, so I have to travel to spaces that I want to serve. So making sure that I do that. One of our best partners is the Watts Coffee House. So funny enough, mentioned that we were going to Watts, and some former coworkers are like, "Oh, is that safe?" I'm like, people live there every day. Like,
What?
that is so problematic to say. Is the whole entire city safe?
Oh my
Is my
gosh.
city safe? It's the safest city. But yeah, I have to do some on ground work. So we do have a supply drive that we're doing that will actually be for people in that area to just come by and get school supplies before school starting. Um, and this will probably already have aired by the time that, but like late August is when we'll have done that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, I actually was just running. So you have to know, like, the community donates and we so appreciate it. But one another person who I try to inspire other people in her network, yeah, my parents' network. My parents are like cheerleaders for us, so they'll like don't. As soon as they hear about an initiative that we have going on, they will just move mountains and make sure that we have things. So like I just casually asked her like, oh, like how much stuff have you gotten? And we set a number for to impact 200 students. So just
Mm-hmm.
put that number out there. Um, and like she sent me the list and I just started crying because she got 200 worth of like students like stuff just has it already,
Wow.
and I'm just like, what a blessing it is, like within your own family. Like I appreciate the community who is still donating to help us do even more, but it's just like that's beautiful. Like I love that we're making sure that my family can give back. And like both my parents work in industries that are social services related, so like that's just a thing built in.
Wow.
But yeah, it's just a beautiful moment and a time of reflection for it's just like I'm just happy, like even if it doesn't leave the Ashe family, that we're able to like pull things together and make stuff happen and like give back no matter what. So yeah, and that's a difficult thing though, activism like online versus in person, because there's so much you can do to rally the troops online, like hold spaces, like everyone with an internet connection can access these thought leadership spaces, and they're like, okay, like this is what we believe in and everything. But like, what about people who are on the ground doing that work? Like I'm like so thankful that there are people who do that and still go out and rally and hold events. And I'm just like, any way that I can support you. I have friends all across the country who are doing this on the ground, like in New York. And
Mm-hmm.
it's just like, okay, anything that I can do to support them, I will make happen. But chances are I'm probably not going to be that person. Like even before COVID, I'm a germaphobe and I don't like people enough to be around big crowds. Like I just recently went to one of my good friends' album release parties, and I was like, I am a fly on the wall right now, and I'm gonna own it because I do not know these people like that. Now I'll find two people that I don't know, and I'll talk to them, and I'll be like, okay, great, like I did the thing, but like that was to make light of like the in-person thing. But like I'm not really that community organizer. Like I'm really big on one-on-one. Like my mentorship is so personal, and like how I am able to navigate these spaces with people who do not look like me, who do not have the same political outlook and same approaches. Like I'm able to find common space, and I think that's a great skill set that I have,
Mm-hmm.
and that I'm able to make moves for the people that I really care about, who do look like me, who do come from my community and beyond, people of color, greater community. It's like, okay, if I have to break bread with people who are making decisions and making sure that they know that he's not the only good one, because that's another layer of things like, oh, well,
Oh god, yeah.
I don't see you as black. You're just Sammy.
Oh
No,
gosh.
Sammy's
Oh my
black.
gosh.
Sammy is a black. He is black, okay? And I want to make sure that people hear within the inflections of my voice. You know, I do sound like you sometimes, and then I don't sound like you when I'm very comfortable. So, but yeah, I want to make sure that I have a good balance of that now that things are, although the Delta variant is
Tough. Mm-hmm.
trying to make sure that as little as possible is happening. But like as much as I can do in person, even if it's behind some plexiglass and I'm just giving people bags of school supplies, like I want to make sure that they know there's a living, breathing family behind the foundation, and a great system of board members who have come from our close knit like family, friends, and like professional contacts, like came together and really care about these students and professionals, because it might not be like a 4-year school that they're pursuing. They might be pursuing like a conservatory
Mm-hmm.
or a trade school. But I just want people to know, like, there's somebody behind this that actually cares. It's not just a marketer. Like I do have a marketing background, so you're going to get some marketing posts, but like I actually care about these people. Like I am literally setting up initiatives so that you are not without. So as long as that comes across within the balance of like my online activism, and it's as sensical as you can be online. That's what I, because I don't argue with people. Now I don't know about you arguing with people in your spaces, but I cannot. I don't argue. I literally have the most basic level of common sense is my approach. So like if you don't agree with that, there's nothing to argue about. We can't talk. It's done. It's done. So but yeah, between the online sensicalness and activism and just making sure people feel comfortable, or at least building those blocks to feel comfortable. and actually seeing my smiling face, maybe behind a mask, but you could see my eyes creasing, like, I'm smiling behind this mask. But no, like, I really want people to be able to see other people again in these spaces, even if it's 6 feet of distance and the mask on.
Mhm.
Like, we need to get back to that
Mhm.
as safely as possible, because I don't know about you, but there was a certain point within the pandemic that I was like, I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
I'm
plenty of times.
done. This remote thing is boring. I'm tired of rolling out of bed, working for 8+ hours, and then my room is still an office. Like,
Yeah.
I'm done. I'm done.
Yeah.
I need a separation of business and, I won't say pleasure, that sounds a different way, but business and personal life, like the work-life balance, that is also a myth. Like, I want that's another episode. Don't worry about it. But no, like the work-life balance, I everything just in balance. So I'll stop there. Everything in balance.
No, I mean, like, I totally agree, and I like what you said about, having your, like being aware of who you are and the situations that you are comfortable with, and the fact that, like, not everyone is going to be the type of activist who's going to go out, hitting the pavements. Not every activist is going to be the one who wants to door knock for a politician. And I think the most important thing is to have the self awareness to know what it is that you want to do and what you can do, and then just try to humanize that process as much as possible, and just try to, like, really help people. Not like, of course, obviously, on my page, we have discussions and we have debates, and I love,
We love to see it.
yeah.
I don't stop. I want you to keep going. I'm just not arguing with anybody.
I mean, obviously, these conversations are important, but it's like
Yes.
I also, and that's why I wanted to start my agency, because I felt like, okay, I have this skill set that I've had from work that I wanted to be able to sort of bring back to my community. So yeah, I love what you said about that, about really taking what it is that you're good at and infusing that within your activism. But unfortunately, we are out of time today. Sammy, it's been a pleasure having you on. Before we head out, what are you working on, and where can the LLAG community find and support you?
Okay, the biggest thing we are working on is our second annual Mentors and Mimosas Gala, which is in person at the Chester, Washington Golf Course. It was virtual last year. This is the first year that we're actually doing it in person. So yeah, I'm super excited about that. We have got multiple vendor spaces if people are interested, and this is in the Los Angeles, California area. So if you want to do something in person, there's also ways to advertise in our booklet and whatnot. So yeah, that's the major thing. And within that event, we have our awards for students. For our scholarship awards, finally getting those out this year. But it's for students who are pursuing the arts, STEM, a community impact award. So someone, it doesn't matter what career path you're looking towards, but have you made an impact in the community? We also do a thank you award to a humanitarian and a benevolence award. So yeah, we'll be announcing those very shortly. But I'm super excited for us to do a little celebration for what we were able to pull together for 2021. It was like partially virtual and then started going back, climbing back outside. So I'm excited for that. But you can follow us everywhere. So LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram at the Ashe Academy. And if you would like to follow me on that public Instagram that I mentioned, uh, that it's Cousin Sammy. And I always have to let people know I'm your primo and your pastor, but I'm not everybody's cousin. So like, you got to act right on the page. That's all that I ask. But please follow me if you're interested in hearing more and seeing more of me.
Well,
Thank you so much for having me.
of course, I will definitely have all your links out so people can go ahead and find you. Sammy, again, it was great. If we're not gonna have you back on the podcast soon, then I know that I'm probably gonna be either on your show, Either way,
yeah.
we're going to be talking again sometime. The community will be able to hear from you again. But again, thank you so much. It's great having you on. Have a nice night, Sammy. All right, take care.